1984 is an adaptation of the classic dystopian novel by George Orwell. It stars John Hurt and is a bleak, oppressive vision of the future that's still relevant today. And this review is our first encounter with any version of that story. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Sister Tara.
Greetings, brothers and sisters, citizens.
I think citizen still works in the context of 1984.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, welcome everyone. It's a sci-fi movie podcast. We get together, we talk about a movie.
Citizens of Oceania, is that where we...
Oceania, yes. Yeah, so we're in 80 season. We're back to 80 season after a little diversion for a new release, and we're looking at 1984. The version, of course, that came out in 1984, because it is the 80 season. Although I suppose it would be a cheeky thing to do, is be like, we'll do the 50s movie, but because it's called 1984, we'll count it. No, we're doing the one starring John Hurt and Richard Burton that came out in 84, and obviously 1984 is a story that we've both heard of. It's referenced a lot. The TV show Big Brother, which originates in the UK, obviously takes its name from this. There's a few phrases in this that kind of come up. In fact, Room 101 was also a TV show in the UK, which I think takes its name from this. So, there's a lot of like cultural things coming from this. People use the phrase Orwellian because George Orwell wrote 1984 to describe certain aspects of dystopian and totalitarian society.
Big Brother, yeah. I think comes from this too.
That's literally what I started with, but
oh.
It's nice though you're paying attention, Tara.
Did you mention Orwellian? George Orwell?
I did, yes, I mentioned that too. Did you listen to a single word I said?
I was just joking.
Okay. Did you introduce me? Did you say my name? Like, yes, I did.
The 84 version of 84.
Yes. Like, they keep bringing up thought crime. Like, that was like the opposite of a thought crime. That was like the no thought crime.
Yeah, I would do very well in that society. No thoughts.
Yes.
Never.
So we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into spoilers, because this was our first experience with this story. Both of us, neither of us have read the book. Neither of us have seen a movie.
I don't know. I feel like it's a required reading in school, but I don't know how it never came up for me.
I mean, there's a lot of like, I think people, there's a bunch of books and plays that people think of as like every school does them, and every school probably does them, but only certain classes do them because they only have so many books to go out. So if you're in the other class, like, you do something else. I
feel like literature teachers or English teachers are like, I'm tired of doing the same books every year. Let me just switch it up. And it's always the year that lands on me. Switch it up with something else.
Yeah, because like most Scottish schools will do Macbeth for Shakespeare, but I never did Macbeth. I did everything but Macbeth, it felt like. So
yeah, Macbeth. I never did Hamlet, which I thought was weird.
Yeah, we did. I did do Hamlet, but like it just depended on what class you were in, because the other classes, because there was like 5 English classes in my year, so
Romeo and Juliet, and Julius Caesar, and Macbeth. Those are the 3 that I did in school.
Yeah, we did Hamlet, Much Ado About Nothing, Merchant of Venice, and I'll always say one more, but I can't remember.
Midsummer Night's Dream, maybe?
Nah, I didn't do that.
And my sister did that one, and I thought that was a weird one. But...
Anyway, we're off track here. 1984. So, yes, 1984 is set. Obviously, it came out in 1949 originally, so it was envisioning this like awful future of 1984. Obviously, we're way past that.
World War II. And yeah.
So we're way past that now, of course, but this is an alternate version of 1984. There's definitely a lot of influence from this in something like V for Vendetta, because it is obviously a very British like take on this type of future. But it is this world where this totalitarian government are in control. There's constant propaganda. They talk a lot about thought crime, and people aren't allowed to like think anything that they're not supposed to think, and freedom and all that. Like almost every type of story that is set in a world like this has taken inspiration from this. This is kind of the originator. And obviously, I mean the book more than this movie, obviously, because by the time this movie came out, there would have been other examples.
This is an adaptation of that, yeah.
So, but this is very much the originator. You can't look at, I don't know what. I mean, actually, I don't know. Was the original Fahrenheit, like the book that Fahrenheit 451 is based on, did that come out before 1984? I have no idea.
I don't know. It probably was around the same time, because even that was about World War II or post World War II, right?
I'm going to check.
Book burning and stuff like that.
It's 4 years later. 1953 is when that came out, so it's just a little bit later.
Yeah.
And that's Ray Bradbury, who's another big notable sci-fi author, of course.
Yeah, probably had inspiration from Orwell as well. Plus, like the constant, the big thing about this is also just the constant life under surveillance.
Yeah, that's the Big Brother aspect. I mean, in the movie, I'm going to say in the movie because we watched the movie, obviously, but in this story, Big Brother's basically that's the who's in charge. They refer to them as Big Brother, and
Big Brother is watching.
Yeah. But they kind of refer to it as almost as if the president, quote unquote, is Big Brother. Whereas I feel like the way we use Big Brother and we say Big Brother is watching, we just mean Big Brother to mean like
government.
The body at large of the people who are spying on us, rather than one specific person. But
even in this, it doesn't they always show one person, but it doesn't feel like that, right? Because whenever you hear somebody, it's not the person. Like you hear somebody who's in charge of watching, somebody else. Yeah, no,
I totally believe that it's entirely possible that this real person, if he ever did exist, maybe doesn't exist anymore, but they still use his image as if he is the one who's at the top of the chain, kind of thing.
There still feels like a controlling party of some type, yeah.
But yeah, so obviously Fahrenheit, maybe lesser examples, but even something like Equilibrium, there's parts of this and that, and other stories like that, and I'm sure there's other examples that I can't think of, but these all owe something to 1984. So it was interesting to sit down and watch this and sort of okay, let's see the originator and see what this does with these ideas and which ones are.
Yeah. I mean, even though I never read it or I never saw any adaptations of it, I feel like I wasn't surprised by the big twists and turns of the film or the world even, because the whole Orwellian is just so part of our zeitgeist, and so many people use it, I think, incorrectly even after watching this too.
Yeah.
On what it means. To
compare it to Fahrenheit 451 a little bit, without getting any spoilery, is that Fahrenheit...
I did read Animal Farm in school, just to throw that out there. So that's the only Orwell book I read.
Okay. So I think the comparison I would make to Fahrenheit 451, just at a sort of surface level, is that Fahrenheit 451 focuses more on two specific things that are kind of hinted at in this, but they're more expanded on in that, which is more about the taking away art and literature, because the book burning is the big part of that, and also the emotion that comes from the art. They're kind of alluded to in this, in the sense that they're kind of they're censoring the dictionary, so there's less words, so people can't express themselves. But it's not specifically going after, we assume they've done that in this, but they never specifically go out their way to make that a big part of the story. It's just kind of implied.
It does seem to be that the only book that is allowed in this is whatever new version of the dictionary is out.
It keeps getting slimmer because they keep censoring more words.
Yeah, and that is to just virtually to eliminate it from the language completely, so that people don't know how to even talk about a revolution or something like
that's the end goal. The end goal is that I think they say in the movie by 2050 we won't even have conversations anymore. We'll just we'll say what we need to say and no more, and that'll be just how the world works. Because anything that can lead to a thought crime is bad. A thought crime being obviously just if you think about doing anything or think about anything that is not in the benefit of the party. That's what they keep talking about, the party.
I feel like there's still a lot of language and words, descriptive words in this that are very much those will probably be illegal in the future, or they're trying to phase those out. But the I think it's his friend that lives in the building with him.
His neighbor.
Keeps using, he keeps using double plus or something to describe when something's good. And I'm like, okay, I can see this. Like they sprinkle in a little bit to where you're like, that's an odd way of saying that something is good.
Yeah, it's almost like because certain words have been banned, this is a new word that's popped up to describe something. Because you just said, "Oh, that's delicious," or something. Because he uses it with food a couple times, and it feels like he's replaced it with this because the other words have went away. So now double plus is what he says. Yeah. Actually, what was your thoughts? Because on the food scene specifically, I felt like this was like a stab at saying, "Oh, in this horrible regime, we don't have real meat." But I thought of you thinking, maybe that's not such a bad thing in this society.
I still don't know what it was, and it looked disgusting.
It did look disgusting, yeah. This did not look good. Because
the food is the beigest color of beige I've ever seen.
He said it tastes like meat and it looks like meat. I'm like, it does not look like meat, buddy. It doesn't even look like tofu. It looks.
I mean, it might look like whatever hot dog is made out of.
It looks like the worst block of like artificial something surrounded by like a really disgusting looking white sauce.
Look like vegetable either though.
No, it looked like it was made out of rubber. If I was to describe a material to it.
Yeah.
So John Hurt's character obviously is our main guy. He's Winston, and he works at the Ministry of, I can't remember the name of it, but he's like part of the censorship regime, right? He like basically he's sent articles and stuff that have either already like been published or going to be published, and he has to like change it. He has to change it like retroactively. So the first example we get in the movie is that there's an article that says something about how there's going to be 30 grams of chocolate rations, and he changes it to be 20 to 25, and it's not like a big change, but almost immediately the next day, like his neighbor says, "Oh, did you hear the rumor? We may be getting 25 grams," and it's like he's happy about that, but the original story was 30, so it's actually worse than it was. And that's the other thing you notice when you're watching this movie, and I assume it's the same in the original story, is they're constantly being told that everything's getting better. Oh, like disease is down 5%. Just constantly, just things like that. Just blurting these things out constantly over these mandatory TV screens that are everywhere. That, as we also see at the start, have cameras in them, and everyone's being watched at all times. With this really menacing face on them.
Did you kind of feel like were you a little reminded of it's a beautiful, not beautiful life, the episode of Twilight Zone where the kid's in charge of everything and everyone has to pretend like everything is the best thing ever?
Oh, I can see that a little bit. Yeah That's what you're saying.
Crossed my mind.
And obviously you've got the whole SS secret police kind of aspect to been taken away if you disagree with the status quo in the party. And obviously the world that he's in
always might be, someone you think you can trust, you say the wrong thing to, may turn you in for thought crime or something like that.
Yeah, and right at the start, Winston as a character, he's keeping a diary to write down his thoughts and how much he feels and hates this place, even though he's playing along with everything. And he's having to do that off in the corner to make sure that like the eyes of Big Brother can't see him do it.
He looks like he's in a prison cell, and he's got like a little fake false brick or whatever that he can pull out and write notes into.
Honestly, with the exception of when we see like a member of the inner party who are like the higher ups, right, and they live in kind of a nicer place, everywhere looks like it's run down and derelict. It looks like just ugly. Everything's grey. It's the most like, but they're constantly told that this is all like, oh, you're all privileged to be a member of this country and this world and being on our side, and like we're all doing our part to like help with the war effort because we're at war with Eurasia. Not to be confused with East Asia, which is later on they talk about East Asia. So like it was like this idea that everything's shit, but we're telling you it's great and you should feel thankful and privileged that this is what the way things are, like, feeds into like what it's saying about government and what and things are better for the inner party. The inner party we see have got privileges. They've got food and stuff that the poors don't have. They have other, I won't spoil them yet, but there's other things. I
just said one.
Sure, I don't think sugar's a spoiler, but there's one specific that I don't want to spoil. So yeah, it's a very bleak film, and I guess we've not even got into if we liked it or not yet. So that's I suppose to that part of the format, the 15 minutes in. Tara, how did you feel about 1984?
I really liked it. I thought it was a really, I assume it's a very faithful adaptation, because it feels like, since it's coming out in 1984, that it should be. And I bet a lot of literature and English professors are like, this is the version to watch. There is a part of it that I think maybe is a bit too, I don't know, like it's missing a little something, but I do think that the message and the world and the acting is really exceptional. So I do find that I really enjoyed watching this.
Yeah, I think the consensus I got just looking at the reception part of the Wikipedia page is that this is the best adaptation and it's a really solid version of it. But the one thing that maybe that they knock against it is that it's still not as good as the source material. You know, it's just that sort of thing with the book so revered that like it can't quite be that, but it's the most interesting and best adaptation.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that.
But as for me, yeah, I liked it. It's a miserable movie. You know, it's a miserable, depressing time. And we'll talk about kind of like how it wraps up its story and how that's also part of the misery when we get to spoilers.
Yeah, the last like third of the movie is quite devastating.
Yeah, but I think it's well directed. I think there's a lot of nice little touches in how it is directed and the way it captures. You know, it doesn't spell too many things out for you. It lets you kind of take in the information, and because we actually meant to record this last week and delayed it, because it was meant to be before the last episode, and we recorded it the same day as the next episode, so that's first and this is second. Look, the point is that I watched it twice, right? So I got to see it a second time, and the second time there was little bits of information that made more sense in the first part of it. That at the first time there was so much to take in that I couldn't process all of it in the one go. So I appreciate that, and I think the performance from John Hurt is solid. Same with Richard Burton, who plays O'Brien, who's a member of the Inner Party.
This is like his last movie too.
Is it? I didn't even realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently he was like really sick during this film. I did see that. Like I glanced at the trivia. I want to say last week when we were going to do it, and it said that he was very sick on set and would mess up his lines all the time and had to be like told his lines as he was saying them. Well, I can't tell in the movie. Like he comes off great in the film. I just clicked on him. He died in 1984. So yeah, yeah, okay. So this probably was his last movie then. Yeah. If but not, then he is great. Certainly one of his last. Yeah, then maybe he sneaked in a little performance in something else after the technically came out later. But yeah, this is probably his last like proper big role. Yeah, probably. So and then the other main character we have to mention is Julia, who's kind of the love interest, which is important because love interest isn't really permitted in this world, and that's kind of a big part of it, of course. So she's played by Suzanne Hamilton, who I don't know. I don't even recognize the name. So no, but I think she's terrific also in this. Oh, she's good in it. Yeah. So yeah, you've got a very well-defined world. It's very bleak, and I think when you deal with a world that is this bleak, I think the direction and the performances and the storytelling have to be exceptional to carry it, because if it doesn't work, if you're not engaged, if you're not feeling the attachment to what's going on, then you're left with this bleak world that's no fun. And so which, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they should have changed anything, because like it's meant to be a bleak story, but it makes it, I think it makes it a challenging thing to adapt and do well, is to capture this tone and atmosphere and not have it. I almost wish there was just a slight more budget to it, Oh sure, yeah. Because I'm assuming it's a British movie, because it's it's a story set in the UK. It's like an all British cast pretty much. Yeah. So I suspect it kind of reminds me of Fahrenheit 451 even when the movie, even though that one came out earlier. Yeah, I think it's the easiest thing to compare it to. There's obviously some similarities in the
it very much this fear
It
of.
looks similar too, though.
I think this the fear of this type of government's clearly something of that time because they were both written in a similar time period.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's because of like Stalin and the rise of communism and stuff like that, and those totalitarian societies and stuff. And yeah, that's what I think it comes from.
Yeah, and I think
World War II, just
and I think
fear of government.
There's clear Nazi influences as well. So, and it's right after that.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of things in the world that are clearly inspiring this fear of where things could go. It's the extreme end of. And, we're at this place now where, some people, compare, like, Google keeping track of, like, what you look at to advertise things to you is like, oh, is that the start of Big Brother? Is that, like, the eyes watching kind of thing? And, like, I get the comparison, but this is very much, like, this extreme end of, like, what could be if you let things, slide. And that's the thing is that
literally everything in your life was under control of something else.
And you kind of get the impression in this, like the viewpoint of whoever's in control, right? Because we never see them. They're just kind of this, like, shadow body of a group behind the scenes. The goal of all of this is just to sort of, like, control people to such an extent that they don't even realize there's anything to fight back against. It's all very methodical and meticulous, to the point where, as we said before, like the hope is the end goal with the language is that they can't even talk about a revolution in the future because they just can't comprehend those ideas.
Yeah. And it's not like far future either. Like 84 is not too far from when the book was written.
No, just over 30.
So there are people there who remember what it was like before and have to know that it was better. So the part that really struck me was like, you see him, he's like fixing his neighbor's sink, and there's two children like watching a public hanging on TV, and the kid's like the son is like automatically accusing him of thought crime. Like you, I know what you are, like you're a thought criminal or something like that. And I'm like, oh, like those kids like are born into this world, so that's all that they know. So they think that this is the only thing that's out there.
Yeah, I immediately looked at the uniforms and went Hitler Youth. That was like the first thing that popped into my head.
Yeah, but that's scary, right? Because that's the next generation. So it's easy for them, if that's all they know, then this is the best that there can be.
Given some
like
flashbacks,
everyone else who's older who can remember.
Yeah, given some flashbacks we get of John Hurt's character, it's clear that the wars that led to this world happened when he was quite young. He was like a child. Yeah. So, in the context of the book, if it's written from the future of when he wrote the book, Orwell, then the wars that led to all this must have been in like the 50s and the early 50s, early to mid 50s. That seems to be the time scale of it. So yeah, you've got these older characters who remember, which means, because O'Brien, this inner party member who we see in the flashback, who kind of like comes and indoctrinates Winston into the system, he obviously is old enough that he remembers before, and I won't say kind of what side he's on, because the story kind of plays with is he secretly a good guy, is he secretly a bad guy, like, what is he? But like clearly whatever side he falls on, he's from the world from before, so either he remembers the world being better and is trying to help like change things back to the way it was, or he's someone who's guilty of being part of what set this world up. He's one of the two, because he existed from before and he was already kind of high ranking. So I think those ideas and like thinking about the world fleshing out is interesting. Obviously most of the movie is very much just in Winston's head, and in the sense that it's following how he's perceiving things, how he feels things for someone else, and the fear of being caught, and just how powerless he feels, I guess, would be the best way to describe it, which is part of why the movie's so bleak. This is not a movie about a guy who like joins a resistance and like ends up being an action hero by the end and starts like taking down the system. Like, that's not what this movie is.
This continues to be a cautionary tale throughout of totalitarianism.
Yeah. So I suppose we give the spoiler warning so we can get into it, because like I don't know.
We're kind of teetering on it anyway. So.
What I will say is that apparently there's two versions of the movie that are the same cut of the film, but they have different soundtracks, because there was like a dispute over like the first soundtrack that was made, and the Criterion Blu-ray. That's not the way I watched it, but if you get the Criterion Blu-ray, you've got a choice of either soundtrack.
Oh, interesting.
Which is interesting.
Is there like a consensus on which one's better?
I don't know. I know that the first one that didn't get used, to get replaced, was more of like a sort of synthy pop kind of sound.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I've got a feeling that we both watched the regular
I
one.
rented it off of Google.
Yeah.
I didn't even think to check Criterion.
I don't know if it's on Criterion's app.
No, it's not on it.
Yeah, but they did a Blu-ray that has both audio options. That's just something I was reading after I watched the movie. I was like, oh.
I'm both upset and glad that it's not on the Criterion app, because I would have much preferred to watch that version instead of renting one.
Sure. I'd be intrigued to see what that alternate music sounds like. But because I think there's like a little bit of it still left in the second version that I think most people have seen. Because there is one bit that sounds a bit synthy, but most of it is just kind of traditional orchestra. But I
don't know that I noticed the score, except for like the military-like scenes.
Yeah, I would be curious. I would be curious to hear the alternate version. But yeah, so full spoilers for 1984 from this point on. You have been warned. So yeah, I think we'll talk about the ideas rather than going scene by scene. I think that makes more sense with this movie. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the big thing in the movie is that he becomes smitten with Julia, who we see staring at him a couple times early on. The opening scene of the movie, of course, is like this assembly they seem to have on a regular basis where all the workers in the area get together and watch a propaganda movie and like all chant and rave and scream traitor at someone they've been told is like a criminal and has done something wrong. Obviously, by the end of the movie, we're going to have very different opinions on all these people that we're seeing confess crimes throughout the film, because it's constantly happening. Every time there's a scene of John Hurt walking through a street, you can just hear someone confessing. Like, mm-hmm. I worked with Goldstein. Goldstein is the guy that they say is like leading the thought crime like movement.
Yeah,
like,
the rebellion.
Yeah. So I was like, yes, I was corrupted by Goldstein, and I am a pervert, and I went to prostitutes. I spread syphilis intentionally. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's really specific, but all right.
Well, sex is kind of outlawed.
I mean, yes, sex is outlawed, but like saying that you intentionally were trying to spread a disease is like a really weird, specific thing.
Well, I think, well, it's part of the propaganda to make people fear sex.
Oh no, absolutely. Like I'm not criticizing the movie for that line. I'm saying that line was what told me that it was fishy.
It's a weird crime. Yeah.
Like that line's the hint to me that they're being forced to say a list of things rather than this was actually what the criminal was doing, because that's really weird and specific.
I did notice it, and I was thinking, like, that's a weird thing that they are making them admit all their crimes like that, and they're so willing to do it. Like, yes, I'm guilty. Here's everything I did. Because that's not something a guilty person would say. Like, they would say, not guilty.
Yeah. So anyway, John Hurt's at this thing, and he does hesitate before he starts like chanting with everyone else. So it's sort of our first hint as an audience that he's, internally not on board, but obviously has to go through it. And we see Julia staring at him there. We see her staring at him again. They see each other in the cafeteria at one point. They see each other at another thing. And then eventually they're walking past each other like near, I don't know, some stairs somewhere when he's walking home.
Like a tunnel of some type, yeah.
And she has got like a, something wrapped around. She's got like her arm sort of in a sling. Mm-hmm. And she drops some stuff. He picks stuff back up and she thanks him. But she's past.
She like eats shit. She like literally just falls on her face.
Sure. But she thanks him, but what really happens here? She passes him a note, and when he looks at the note later, when he's at his work, it says "I love you." And because his work has like a little furnace to like get rid of all the evidence of all the previous versions of things, he can put it in there. But it just says "I love you," and it got me thinking that in a world where no one can actually date or get to know each other, like you would just like be attracted to someone and go, okay, this is love, because
they're also they may not have the words anymore to say something a bit more nuanced.
True,
they just go straight to "I love you." I have that means I have feelings for you in this world now.
So it's also got like a place to see her again in the back, right? And there she gives him more instructions, like, can you get this day off? Come here. And what's notable is that he keeps, whenever he dreams and he's thinking of a better world, he always thinks of this field, this like open field of just green, right? Because the world that he lives in is so grey, right? It's all just grey buildings that are all run down. It looks like it's war torn and poor. It's what like movies always make Eastern Europe look like. I feel like.
Look, I've been to Vladivostok, Russia. I'm sure Russia has some nice parts, but it is the grayest place I've ever seen, and it reminded me so much of this movie. That's
fair. That's fair. So they meet basically out in the woods, right? He gets the train, and they meet out in the woods, and she does actually, like, so they have sex here, right? They have sex in the woods, and she disrobes, and I joked when I was watching this scene that, hey, it's called 1984. It came out in 1984, but its heart's in the 70s because that's Phil Bush.
Oh, yeah.
It does actually feel like a 70s movie to me. Like, tone-wise, it doesn't feel like an 80s movie.
I think it's because it's British.
That might be it, yeah. It may just because it's British. But it doesn't feel like an 80s American movie. There's something about it
that has almost like a TV movie quality. But it's got all this nudity, so obviously it's not that.
It's got more style as well. It feels it feels stylish, and it's how it's directed. But yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. But like the look of it feels like it's a little behind.
Yeah. Sure. Anyway, what was I getting to? Yeah. So she does actually disrobe because they all wear what?
The bush.
The bush, yes. I'm mesmerized by a bush. My mind's wandering. But she disrobes, right? Because they're all wearing these like overalls and very prison-like. You know, I think that's intentional and a design choice.
Coveralls, yeah.
And she just kind of opens. She's not wearing any underwear. She's just full naked. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is that before we see it for real, we see it twice, because the first time he sees it in front of that sort of visage of the open field that he's been seeing in his dreams, right? Which he kind of just saw in real life at the edge of the forest. It's kind of like the perfect location, right? With the woman in the middle of it. And then it's like, okay, you know, and he obviously he's just sort of dipping his toes in this kind of thing. There's a scene before this where he talks about going into the proletarian area. I got there, right? And he went to he went to a prostitute, right? And the way it portrays this is something that he felt the urge to do, and he couldn't resist like the idea of doing it. But it's definitely presented in this sort of grimy, dark, kind of like seedy, like, you know, way, right? Where it feels like he was doing something really bad, or like this was obviously a more open thing because this is something that Julia also wants. But he asks her, you know, have you done this before? And she says hundreds of times, which is a very daunting answer. But and
I wasn't sure if she was being serious.
Yeah, I don't know either. He says, like, with party members...
She goes, oh yeah, hundreds of times.
And he says party members, she says yes, but he says in her party members, she said, no, I would never do that. And it sounds like she's disgusted by the thought, yeah, I would never, because they're like they're the evil who run this shit. Like, they're the ones who are higher up the food chain, so she would never do that. Although she admits that other people probably would.
Yeah, I guess it's... Maybe she is telling the truth. Maybe she doesn't know exactly how many, and she's just like, oh yeah, hundreds of times. But, you know, and then he follows up with, I hate purity, you know, and I like corruption. Like, he's aroused by corruption. So maybe the hundreds of times is like, is a great thing.
Oh, yeah, it's a turn on, because he's basically... Like, he doesn't have the words to say, "Oh, you dirty slut," but that's what he's thinking, right? In a good way. He's you know, his fantasy's playing out here. No, but it makes sense though. In this world where everything's deemed corrupt, even just basic sex is corrupt. It makes sense. Like, I understood. Like, when he's saying this, I didn't take this. He's got a kink for like, being like, you know, dirty.
No, I like she's willing to like break the law.
Yeah,
you know.
I took this just more. He's so oppressed by this world that he's like, no, I want to do the things they're telling me we're not allowed to do. So I love corruption. I hate this purity bullshit. And, you know...
And she is much younger than him also. So...
Yeah.
It could be like he just needs that confirmation that she's not young and pure. And not just in like the what the government deems as that, but like, oh no, she's already like someone who is as corrupt as me. Like, because I went and got paid for sex somewhere and she's just giving it out freely. It's just a validation that he's not taking someone's purity from someone so much younger than him.
Yeah. Although, given all of her secret messaging, it does feel like she is more experienced in all of this. You know, like, it feels like this is the sort of thing that she's done at least some times, maybe not hundreds of times literally, but certainly sometimes before. Because she's got all this secret messaging and, like, you know, how to, like, talk to him down pat.
She knows where to go.
Yeah. And he obviously takes this risk by renting this bedroom above, like a little, like, sort of antique store.
Shop. Yeah.
That's in the proletarian area. And you know, obviously the big twist with this is that the old guy who works here is actually a secret spy, and there's a Big Brother TV / camera behind this painting in the room, so that everything they've done and said has been caught, like, on camera, and they've been heard talking, and it was all, you know. I think this idea, because the old guy in this shop, like, shows him this room before any of this romance stuff really starts. And it's almost like it is meant to be kind of a trap that maybe all boils down to something as simple as, because he mentions that this guy sold him the journal that he's writing in. You know, he says that, you sold me the journal, and it makes me think that flagged him. So he's like a person of interest to everyone now, like, who's looking for traitors. And we know O'Brien, who's part of the inner party, sort of keeping an eye on him, and starting to ask questions later on.
He never asked for Goldstein's book, though, right? Because that was the thing that everyone said is, oh, have you heard about Goldstein and his book? Which might not even exist.
It probably does. I mean, Goldstein probably doesn't even exist, to be honest.
No, I don't think so. But, like, even use that, oh, if you ask for Goldstein's book and there is a copy. No, it does exist, because he says he wrote it, right? Later on.
Oh yeah. One of the people for the system actually wrote it. Yeah, but so to basically to again, like, perpetrate these lies.
To snuff out all the
because that's one of the big things that comes up is that there is no rebellion. Like, they want to believe there's a rebellion, but like, it's just like a facade to.
You know what this is? Matrix Revolutions, also. Oh no, Matrix Reloaded.
Aye, but
the architect, right?
But not shit.
But not shit.
Yeah, I get what you said. Yeah, it's basically just, again, it's like the idea that part of this whole lie to keep people in line, because obviously the war's also fake. The idea that during wartime you can, like, force people to, like, work under bad conditions, but also make them feel that they're all part of, like, one side, so they don't want to rebel. You know, like, it's all, like, orchestrated in the same way that even the idea for people who are starting to hate this place and want to rebel, the idea that there might be a rebellion almost, like, makes them, like, mess up and reveal because they're hoping to find the rebellion, but instead, no, there is nothing. Goldstein's a lie. There is no, like, orchestrated, like, effort kind of thing. But anyway, we'll get into all that. I just, like, this whole room thing just felt like a bit of an entrapment to me. And but they meet.
I didn't think so until the betrayal actually happened.
Yeah, they meet there multiple times, of course, and they get together, they have sex. She, like, has found stuff, like, that the inner party have. She's, like, got from black market, maybe other people who are, like, having a list.
She gets coffee.
She has coffee, she has real bread, real jam, sugar. They're very excited by this. This is, like, a really boring meal if you're used to having everything at your fingertips, but
look, I saw what they were served at the chow line.
Oh, true. Yes.
By that really sad woman that John Hurt seemed to be attracted to.
It's like, you're a woman.
I think that was literally it. I think he was something about her that he was just like, I don't know why, but I'm attracted to her.
I think there was even a little bit of attraction because, you know, there's, like, he's doing these, like, mandatory exercises at the start of the movie, and there's, like, the woman on the TV saying, hey, you're not doing well enough. Do it like this. You're under 45. You should be able to touch your toes.
Well, maybe it's just establishing that he's horny. So, like, this beautiful young woman is just like, I love you. And he's like, yes, okay. I'm in. This is the gift that I need right now.
It's not like anyone has a lot of choices in this world, let's be honest. Like,
yeah,
finding someone who's willing to break all these rules to, like, be intimate with you is kind of like a gold mine in this world.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a good time to discuss, like, the women in this world are, like, literally trained not to have orgasms. Like, they're not.
Okay, hold on. Let's talk about the actual phrase, because you've just thrown that out there. The phrase that's brought up in a speech in this movie is, and I quote, the eradication of the orgasm.
Yes. And so sex is not allowed to be pleasurable.
But that's not just for the women, though. It's for the men too, I think.
I suppose. I think it's harder for that.
No. If it's harder, it means it's working properly.
That's so stupid. I think it means that it's because a sexual act can occur for a woman and she doesn't have to have an orgasm. So but the men, like, that's always going to happen for the men in order to procreate, which is what sex is for now, just procreation.
I think they're talking about both men and women in the scene with the guys giving the speech to him, because it sounded like they wanted, like, have no natural births, everyone's artificially inseminated. It really sounded like anyone, like, caught lusting or wanting a family means you'll have loyalty to something that isn't the party. It means you'll have priorities that aren't the party, and we don't want that.
Yeah, they say that later on in the movie too. They're like, love is just for love of your country or love of your party. So
that goes equally for men and women. So while I'm not saying that this regime is probably not really sexist, I don't think this is specifically about sexism. I think this is about everyone.
I didn't get the idea that they were doing any kind of artificial insemination. I thought it was like, no, we will decide when you have sex, and it's not for pleasure, it's just for procreation.
No. They literally say it. One of the videos that plays at one point, they're talking about how 10,000 women have just taken a vow of celibacy because they're dedicated to the party. And just as it's trailing off, it talks about how, like, you know, childbirth will only be through artificial insemination. Like, it is said at one point. So that's clearly what the goal is. The goal is to eradicate sex. Although, much like The Handmaid's Tale, I bet you the inner party guys are all having orgies behind closed doors.
Yeah, with each other.
With each other.
In a hot tub.
But, yeah, no, like, like, that's the idea of the eradication of the orgasm, because that's something that you want because it's pleasurable. So we have to eradicate that desire and completely.
Yeah, you can't have love for someone else. You know, something like that, you know, can cause people, even if they don't like each other before, like, in the moment, you know, you love them.
Aye. One way to put it, I suppose. But yeah, the idea that it can lead to feelings, it can lead to you caring about someone, and if you care about someone, because they don't want families, like, they want to eradicate the family unit as well, like, they want that gone. So, and I guess that's one of the smart bits of storytelling here, is that we still see parents with kids, you know, we see the neighbors with the kids, but clearly that's like, this is still something that's transitory, in the same way that they're trying to wean out language, but they're not there yet. It's like, okay, this is how bad things have already gotten, but their end goal is much worse. It's to completely remove anything that resembles, like, human life as we know it.
It'll be once the baby is, like, weaned off of the breast, then it'll belong to the government or whatever the party is. Yeah,
they'll all just be in, like, youth camps and shit like that.
Yes.
Learn to do whatever it is they do. And it does make you wonder about the rest of the world, because we know that the wars are fake, or at least it's, you know, implied that the wars are just always fake. So it's like, okay, so what is the rest of the world? Are they all part of the same regime? Is there different regimes? Is this closed off, like Gilead? Like, it's funny that I didn't bring up Handmaid's Tale yet, because the fact that it's got, like, a different name for, I'm assuming the Oceania's the UK, but it could be more than that. It could be part of Europe as well. I don't know how big this spreads. But in the same way that in Handmaid's Tale, America's now Gilead. But in Handmaid's Tale, like, the rest of the world's still there, because, you know, it talks of, you know, you see Canada, you see, like, you see people escaping and going to Canada for asylum because, like, Gilead's a shithole, like, and things like that. So it does make you wonder, like, you know, like, is it possible if they swam to France, which people can do? that's the thing people do. They swim the channel. Like,
okay, yeah, not from America.
Not from America, no. But in this specifically, because it's in London.
Okay, yeah.
You can swim to France, in theory. I'm not saying most people can do it, but some people have done it.
That's true.
Like, is France better? If you get to France, are you out of this shithole and into, like, a better society? And
was it a woman that did it first?
That sounds true.
Swam the English Channel.
I think people, like, a bunch of celebrities have done it for charity now, so it's not like a super rare thing. But yeah, it may have been. I don't know, but yeah, I think part of that's also part of the oppression. I like that the movie doesn't tell us that, because, like, these characters don't know that. Like, John Hurt's character Winston doesn't know if there is like a promised land outside of this world that is a sanctuary, you know, because that would give them hope. That would be like, oh, there's a place we can go if we somehow escape.
It's war out there.
Yeah, it's just war. Yeah. And just when the war with Eurasia seems like it's finishing, oh no, there's a war with East Asia. It's just kicked off. Oh well.
We've always been at war with East Asia. What are you talking about?
Yeah. That's the funny thing as well that they sort of bring into the movie as it goes on, is this idea that it's not just that they will make up more lies. It's like they have to also erase the previous lies, as if like this has always been true, and that's like especially insidious. Because one of the things that John Hurt writes in his journal right at the start of the movie is, like freedom is having the freedom to say 2 + 2 = 4, because that's truth. And that comes up again later when he's being tortured. That no, in fact, Joe is very much like it's that Star Trek episode.
There are 4 lights.
The 4 lights. I was thinking of the 4 lights when he was been asked how many fingers he was holding up.
I thought that episode was so clever.
It's just 1984, Tara. Come on, Star Trek.
I didn't know.
Bunch of hacks.
That's the thing. I didn't know that about this movie, about the story.
I mean, I think it's fair to say, especially since it is the number 4 again, that it's probably a direct inspiration on that Star Trek episode.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's no denying it, I don't think. That's a really interesting idea that comes up, because we see, this is the thing, is that part of the reason why John Hurt's character is so disillusioned and is like obviously seeing the falsehood that is there, is because his job is literally doctoring things, and he's starting to doctor things that he's seeing then be like told to the world. So he's, he replaces someone who is meant to be like a fallen hero with another face, and then he sees that face being broadcasted. Hey, this is a fallen hero. So he's seeing the lies being told to everyone, and he's aware that it's happening because he's the one that's doing some of them. Mm-hmm. So he knows it's all bullshit.
Yeah, that's why he's one of the people who, ends up turning. Yeah.
So one of the interesting ideas that's brought up, so they've been seeing each other in this bedroom for a while, and they're having these romantic like get-togethers, and they start talking about what happens, because they both kind of just agree it's inevitable that this will end, that they'll get caught. Like they know it's like the safest thing to do would be to just stop, but they can't, right? That's the human nature part of it, is that we can't resist. And
they need someone.
He says that, like, yeah, they'll make us talk, but he's like, that's not betrayal though, because of course they can torture us and make us talk, but like actually making me not love you, that would be betrayal. If inside I didn't love you anymore, that's what betrayal would really be. It's not if I tell them everything they want to know about you, like, you'll understand why I did, because we both live in this world, we understand what they're going to do. But that's what betrayal would be, and that's obviously the big thing that comes up. And the last third of the movie, when he is captured and she's captured and we see him being tortured, the one thing we're clinging to as an audience is, okay, say whatever they want him to say, but will he still feel it deep down inside? Is it still going to be there? And I guess the part of this movie that makes me feel like it is really bleak is that the ending makes it feel like he doesn't, like they truly have stamped it out of him, and he,
not just him, also, and
her too. Yeah, the idea that all he loves now is the party. Because part of me was hoping that he was going to, so I'm skipping over stuff. We'll go back to all the torture, but like, it seems like they've stamped it out of him and they've put him back into the world because they've conditioned him correctly. And he's one of these people who are on the screen confessing to his crimes. And this actually made me laugh in a dark way, because the crimes he confesses to, because, okay, the first couple are like, okay, I've went into the dodgy areas, I've had sex with prostitutes. He says these things. And then he's like, I betrayed my wife. And I'm like, wife? He didn't have a wife. What are we talking about? And then he's like, oh, I gave launch codes, or I guided missiles from like the enemy.
But that's the thing, like, there are no wives that we see, right? Because then they would have sex. So like, maybe they do have wives, but the wives are not allowed to live with them. The
neighbor had a wife though, because that was
was that the one who sank the
I think that was the same. Yeah, that was the guy's wife. Yeah.
Okay. I thought maybe it was possible that he did have like an assigned wife, but like she wasn't allowed to be with him unless they had to procreate for, once, not for pleasure, but just for just for making a baby. I mean, they got to replace the people, the workers.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, they need more people. Like every regime that's in power wants there to be more conception. Like they want more bodies to like just keep throwing at the problem. Yeah. So anyway, the scene at the end when he's back out and he's hearing himself confess to stuff, he does like draw in the dust on the table 2 + 2 equals, but he doesn't put the last digit. And I was hoping at the very end, even though he was not like, you know, because he sees Julia and they're very cordial and they say, "I'm glad they caught us before it was too late and they've fixed us," kind of thing. That's the gist of the conversation.
Yeah.
But they say
she says like, "I told them about you."
Yeah. But right before she leaves, they both say we should see each other again in a very kind of like, you know, again, very cold way. It's like, "Oh, we should see each other again sometime," and she leaves. And I was like, oh, is that the start of a hint that they do both still feel like, you know, whatever they've done to them, that deep down they still feel something? And I thought that the cap on that would be him like finishing the 2 + 2 = 4. You know, maybe he'd write in the 4 at the end. But instead he doesn't. He just says, "I love you," but he doesn't say it to her. He says it to the voice on the screen. He says it to the party. He loves Big Brother, right? And he sort of crying as he says it. So he does feel the pain that he's like, this is what's become of him. You know, on some emotional level he feels it, and that's when the movie ends. Like that's the bleak ass ending. Like I feel like I never expected him to like get away or like start a rebellion or anything like that. It's not that type of movie. But part of me
just to hold on to the one bit of hope.
Yeah, but I thought maybe he would like either he would say something, or maybe she had written in the dust on the other side, "I love you," to show that she still cared, or something, like some little thing that said there was still a part of their humanity left in there. But the movie's like, nope. It worked.
Yeah, that is the darkest part, is that it worked, and it worked twice, meaning like if these two can't do it, no one can.
Yeah. So it's like it's very much because a lot of cautionary tales in movies and books and stuff, they'll still give you an ending where they eventually try and like break out of this bad future or bad like scenario that they're in. This is not that. This is like, no, this is the bad ending. We can't let the world go like this because there's no getting out of it once it's there. And this is the point of the story. Well, part of the point of the story. So,
pretty effective though.
Oh yeah, I mean, you feel the gut punch when the credits start like playing. You're like, shit, that's it. There's no moment of hope. No little moment of...
You know how it ends after the credits.
Yeah, Trigger pours him the booze and he says, "I love you," and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
The actor who's the waiter in that scene played Trigger on a UK TV show. That's why I called him that.
Yeah, I didn't know what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Like, is that a character I missed?
Fans of Only Fools and Horses will get the reference, which is few of you because most of you listening are American, but that's fine. It's whatever. Yeah, we have to talk about all the torture stuff though. You know, the conditioning, obviously the how many fingers am I holding up? It's 4. Is it 4? Like, it's how many I say it is. If I say that we are still at war, if we were always at war with East Asia, then we're always at war with East Asia. That's how this works. It leads to him going into room 101, which is a room where obviously it's designed for each person in mind, because it's his own worst fear with the rats, and it's his worst fear because we saw in his flashbacks that he found his dead mother being eaten by rats. That's why he's specifically got a fear of rats. So they put his face up to this cage that's got rats in it, and they're going to let the rats eat his face unless he says the right thing. The right thing turns out to be don't do this to me, do it to her, do it to Julia. It basically has to completely turn on her for them to believe that they've successfully conditioned them.
Yeah, she's the one that did this to me.
Yeah, she's a horrible sex pest that she is.
She's the reason that I'm that I betrayed you guys. Is because I was tricked by her.
And it's really sad though, because they actually did seem like they were in love, and in whatever way you could fall in love in this world, you know, where.
Yeah, I mean, the movie really picks up, obviously, with the torture, because it's hard to ignore what you're watching on screen, especially because you watch him like deteriorate so much, and you have no idea how long he's been there. Like, he doesn't know.
Yeah, no idea.
You assume it's been a long time because he gets real messed up, and like the first time that he's, you know, he says he sees 4 fingers, and then he's told that's the wrong answer. And so instead he just says 5, and then he still gets punished because he's lying. And he says, like, I want to see 5, but I don't see it. So, you know, like, the whole point is to beat him until he actually does see 5.
Yeah,
you know?
One of the things we have to talk about with O'Brien, you know, Richard Burton's character, who's administering the torture. So obviously at this point we know he's a bad guy, right? Obviously, he's one of the inner party. He wears the black overall instead of the blue, which tells us that he's higher up. He invites, before he's captured, obviously, he invites Winston over to give him a copy of the 10th edition of the dictionary, because his last couple of articles in the paper have had a couple of words that have actually been removed, and it's like, hey, there's a couple of dodgy words in there. You don't have you look at the 9th edition. Come over, I'll give you the 10th. And there's a couple of things here that maybe hint that he's actually secretly part of the rebellion. It's kind of this hope that he's actually, because he gives him the dictionary. But,
yeah, like he's trying to isolate him from the rest of the group so he can have a real discussion or something.
Yeah, because he first of all, we see he can turn off his TV that's got all the propaganda on it, and like Winston's like, you can turn it off? And he's like, yes, we have that privilege, and like, this is called wine, have some wine. And he basically gives him a little speech about how the rebellion's real, but it's not like an organization like you would think. It's more subtle. It's all just these individual people acting out, and that's what the rebellion is. But he gives him the dictionary, and when he looks at the dictionary later, it turns out that this has actually secretly got another book inside it. Like, all the pages like split to reveal. Basically, it's like a book talking about what the party does. And it's like an honest, like, almost like an instruction manual for how to run this regime, which is, the population has to believe in war, so they'll be okay suffering in poverty. The population has to believe this, they have to believe that. And you're thinking, oh, did he give him this because he's like trying to like open his mind? He's trying to wake him up, akin to a Matrix, like, hey, this is the world you're living in, like, join the rebellion. Or is he giving him this to see if he like tries to use it, if he like acts out, or like, will he return it and say, this is, well, maybe he's saying, will he turn me in? Will he go to someone else and say, hey, he handed me this book and it's got all this like thought crime shit in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But of course he just reads it to Julia when they're together, and it's that very night when they're together, that the voice just starts speaking to them from behind the photo.
It does. I like that in the movie though. It doesn't really seem like it's coming from anywhere specifically. Like, it's just a big booming voice that could be coming from anywhere.
I do love that when the photo frame falls down though, that same face that's been on all the screens the whole movie's just staring at them.
Brother.
It's like, it's there.
Right there with the mustache.
He's watching it, yeah. And I don't think it actually is a Hitler tash, but it's very close to a Hitler tash. I think that's intentional, probably.
A very prominent mustache.
Yeah. So yeah, I think those moments are captured really well. I really like the scenes, like the scene where he goes to the prostitute early on. I think is really well shot, because it's got this really kind of almost like dark dream quality to it. Of him, because it's all shot in first person, because you don't see him, you just see his perspective.
Yeah. And he describes her as having a young face, and it was painted, and like, but when you get up close to her, you see that she's a lot older than he's describing. But he likes the paint, he likes the mask, and like he likes doing this dirty thing with I don't know, like he describes the makeup on her as a mask that he prefers, and I'm trying to reach for what that really translates to, but I don't know. He likes that it's devious in a way, I guess.
I guess you could just, you could strip it back further than that and say it's just, it's expression. Like, ultimately makeup's a form of expression, and that's something these people aren't allowed to do.
Yeah, because I think on like their second or third meeting in the bedroom, she like puts a dress on and puts makeup on, and it is like a white powder with red lipstick, just like the prostitute had. It looks much, nicer on her, but she's clearly using it to make herself beautiful. Yeah,
it's like a nice surprise for him, because she's like, turn around, and then he turns back, and he's like in shock.
Like, they have this little moment of like pretending to be on a date.
Yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing, is it's like, it'd be very easy to have a bunch of the older characters talk about the way things used to be, and that would be fine, but the movie doesn't like spell those things out. It's like, you get from this,
too dangerous too, probably.
Yeah, but you get from this very moment that this is the sort of thing, they don't have regular dates anymore. I mean, obviously they don't, but the fact that this is such a big deal in the moment kind of tells you that, You get that from the context. So it's telling you a lot without over-explaining anything, which is good. It's smart storytelling, I think. One thing we have to talk about him, Winston, mentioned the dead mother, but there's a whole element to his flashbacks where he stole chocolate from his sister's hand, and he ran away, and then when he came back, they were gone, and they were both dead, and that's when O'Brien came in and sort of like recruited him effectively and brought him into the system. So obviously there's the guilt, there's the idea that he took something he wanted from someone, which maybe fits into the themes a little bit of the system. Maybe he feels guilty that he saw something he wanted and took it. Maybe that's why he was sort of like a willing part of this system for so long, because he felt guilty that he took something that he desired. So maybe he agreed for a long time until he sort of woke up, as he grew up, that maybe we should be restricted and we shouldn't just get what we want.
I mean, it led to his mother dying, or at least I don't know if it led to it specifically, but he came back and they were dead. So so he associates it at least himself. The other thing I really like is when he's being tortured later on, there's a couple of moments where O'Brien like appears like next to him in the field, and it's almost like, we're talking about how it's stamping out how he feels for Julia, and how it's like not just because they talk about how the one thing they can't take away is what we actually think inside, but that's kind of like what they keep talking about is thought crime. That's what they want to do. Yeah, and he's creeping into the inside.
Yeah, like exactly.
His moments of happiness in his mind are being taken over by O'Brien.
Yeah, he's literally appearing in those dream or fantasy sequences. So
to the point where he says, "I love you."
It's a very good visual representation of them succeeding to do exactly what they said they couldn't do. So, and I guess that's the biggest warning side of the movie is like, we all assume that people can't change how we think, but maybe they can. Like, that's the fear here, is that if they get this powerful, can they then control how we think? So, and so much of the movie's about that, with the propaganda and the just making up lies and having everyone in fear. I really like the scene where he's locked up and like his neighbor comes in. He's also locked up, and it's his daughter, probably one of the same two kids that said he was a thought criminal. My daughter caught me. Oh, I'm so proud of her, he says, as he's like, she sent me to prison. Luckily they can recondition me before it's too late, kind of thing. Because we see other criminals confessing throughout the movie, and we see that they were in this same bar that Winston's in at the end, and all these little details throughout. Like, I was noting a lot of these little sprinkling of details, like the second time especially.
Second viewing, yeah.
So it's good.
Yeah, pretty good.
It's very bleak. It's a very.
It is.
It's just not a happy experience.
Necessarily bleak though, for what it is. I think giving you any kind of happy ending is would take away from the urgency of the message.
I think I was expecting a moment of hope, not any kind of victory, but just like, he still feels something, so that's the win, that's the victory.
Bad guys have to win here, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's depressing, but I respect it.
Is.
I respect them sticking to their guns. I really do. Because this is the sort of thing they could have like changed from the book if they really wanted to just let's give it a more hopeful ending, but they didn't. They stuck to it.
Maybe the American version would do it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, maybe the American version would have him breaking out of the torture camp with a machine gun, probably, and going to find Julia.
That sounds cool too.
He's like, Julia. Like, I don't know why I'm doing like
played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
I was going for more like Rambo Stallone yelling, but yeah, sure. Arnold's fine.
If it came out in '84.
That could have been either of them in '84. They're both kind of in their peak, right? Well,
give us the McTiernan version.
But no, that's the great thing about like what the genre that this and Fahrenheit 451 kind of kickstarted. I mean, if they're not the first examples, they're certainly the two that made them big. Was this the idea of the dystopian future?
There's a little bit of Metropolis in this too, I think.
Oh, sure.
Which obviously came out so much before, but
that's the neat thing. Not only did Metropolis exist before it's a movie that existed before the books was written, which is kind of interesting. But no, I think that the great thing about like setting this up as a new subgenre, which how often does that happen now, where a new movie like makes a new subgenre? It doesn't happen often. But this is obviously this is early in the days of storytelling, and I'm talking about the books here rather than the movies. But the idea that we've had like more lighthearted versions of this story, we've had more action movie versions, we've had different takes on this type of story, which is why it's okay that 1984 gets to just remain the unrelentingly bleak one, because that's the one that started it and that's what the vision was.
Yeah.
So, is it my favorite of this type of story? I'd have to think about what other dystopian movies, specifically with this type of like oppressive system, I've seen to think about. But no, but it is good. It is a really solid movie. It's a very different type of movie for the 80s, because I think 80s I associate with more upbeat like entertainment than I do serious dramatic film. But this definitely veers more on that side of the spectrum.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you'd like to add before we?
No, I mean, I see why the book is probably a masterpiece, though.
Sure. I mean,
and I've downloaded it, so I'll be reading it. I'll be listening to the audio version.
Well, I mean, the book, I would assume, because it's like, because there's a bit of narration in this, but I assume the book is very much in his head. And it wouldn't surprise me if it even plays, because if the whole idea of the story is that ultimately his thoughts are going to be manipulated by this regime, and he's going to be tortured,
so the narration will change.
Yeah, that I'm thinking the book might play with that, because they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, even in the movie, we are constantly seeing the world through just his eyes.
Yeah.
Just Winston. Like we don't get a scene with her on her own or anything.
Never,
like
no.
that.
We never cut away, no.
Yeah, it's just Winston the whole movie.
Yeah. The only time that it feels that we're not with him, but we are still, really, is when it's like a crowd watching something. But he's still in the crowd. He's still there. It's just, that's the only time it feels that we're not right up next to him,
Yeah.
It's the only time we get a little bit of distance. But, yeah. So, no, I'm glad to have finally seen this. I kind of, because it's not like held up in the same high regard that a lot of other sci-fi classics are, like I always kind of assumed it might be a little bit lukewarm. And, well, I don't think it's as good as, say, like a, pick another, like a 2001 or,
Yeah, I can see this being adapted from a literature masterpiece, but I don't consider this one to be a masterpiece.
Yeah, but it's a very good adaptation of what the book, I assume, is.
Yeah, I suspect so.
Because it is well directed, it's got the right tone, good performances, the point that it makes by the end is solid. So, yeah, it's almost daunting to even like try and dissect something like this, because it is like the birth of an entire subgenre of science
I'm
fiction.
Sure there's so many themes that I don't think we got into. I mean, that's more on the literature side probably, but like maybe if we had both read it in school, we'd be able to talk a little bit more about that kind of stuff.
I mean, I think we tackled some of the bigger sci-fi themes, but yeah, I'm sure those. Yeah. I'm sure if an English professor's dissecting the novel, there's a lot more.
I'm sure they have a whole class on it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like entire like hours of like lectures on things we didn't even talk about for a second.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we just kind of casually brushed over, but the idea that he could just get on a train and go to a much nicer countryside that seems much more peaceful, and like, can they just hide here? Like, is it possible? You just go and hide in the woods and just stay off the grid effectively? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, what compels them to return?
Yeah. But there you go. That's 1984. I suppose we'll rate the movie then. Tara, what are you giving the film?
Well, I mean, I did kind of love it, but I don't know if I don't know if I'm really ready to give it like a really high rating, even though I do think it's really great. So I'm gonna go 8.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a straight 8. I think it's really solid and is pretty great, but I don't. I think it's just missing that extra little something that, I think on some level and this is probably intentional, but the character is just a little bit distant to me versus other protagonists that I've maybe seen in similar types of stories, and maybe it is just a lack of hope that like I guess like early on I'm like, this is going to be bleak, so I'm not going to like let myself get too emotionally attached to anything because I don't want to be hurt, kind of thing. So I don't know if the lack of a little bit of hope or maybe something else, like maybe just a little bit more of a budget to give it even more of a.
Which it's odd though, because we do praise bleakness.
Yeah.
When the movies have like the balls to do it, because I think that's also why we rated The Day the Earth Caught Fire, another British movie.
That's true.
Very highly, is because we're like, we just don't get movies like this from this time period.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, there's maybe just a little extra something that it could have had that would have put it over the edge, but it is very good, and I think it's worth seeing if you like sci-fi. And
yeah, it definitely feels like necessary reading, maybe not necessary viewing, but like for those who don't want to read, this is probably the best version you're going to get.
I suspect so. Yes.
And I don't know that there would be another reason to make an adaptation that would be possibly better, but I mean obviously it's very appropriate that they did one for the year 1984.
It was the perfect time to do it, wasn't it? I mean, like, they got to the year. Like, if they were ever going to remake 2001, they had their chance in 2001, and now no.
Now it's just too old. It's too old future.
Yeah. Don't do it.
Remake 2001. You're a monster for even saying that.
Hey, they've remade films they shouldn't have touched, and 2001's also one they shouldn't touch.
Yeah, we should do the Total Recall remake.
I mean,
it's not a remake though, right? Isn't it just it's an adaptation of a Philip K. Dick story? So it's just another adaptation, another version of it, not a remake.
Depending on how close they both are to the book, though, it may just feel like a remake anyway.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know that Verhoeven ever finishes the books that he's adapting. So.
I'll read the first couple chapters, get a feel for it, and then just make up the rest.
I'm pretty sure that's what Starship Troopers was, yeah.
Interesting, okay. All right, well, that's our thoughts on 1984. Of course, you can let us know what you thought of the movie in the comments. Please do, like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff helps us out a lot. And of course, you can get some bonuses if you go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Monthly bonus episodes, and then a second monthly show at the $5 tier called Meltdown, where we just talk about all the different movies we've been watching throughout the month and give each other a sci-fi movie quiz. But you can go check out that if you want to, so please do. I will thank our Patreon producers for the month, so thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Bordnow, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Al Treisman. Thank you to you all for supporting the show, and thank you to all our patrons and all our viewers. Thank you. But that is the show. Next week, not next month. Don't worry, there's an episode.
Am I getting a break?
Next week, sticking with the 80s season, we are looking at another relative biggie, one that Tara's not seen before, and that is Videodrome. So look forward to that.
I've been looking forward to checking this out since we started Ace.
Yeah, and we've done a couple of Cronenberg, I think. Well, at least one David and one Brandon.
There's a new Brandon Cronenberg.
There is. So we will be doing his new film at some point this year.
Infinity Pool.
Yeah. It got released at different times in the US and the UK, so we didn't have a chance to do it yet. But
yeah, I think it's in theaters now. Or at least maybe I missed my window.
Yeah. So we'll get to that later on. But yeah, so we'll do a David Cronenberg. We'll do the Videodrome. So look forward to that next week. Hope you had fun with this episode, and we'll see you next time. So keep watching sci-fi and computer at Salsa.